Hey, what's going on guys? It's me here, Squidgy, and something tells me that if you're here on this actual guide to playing Mercy, you may be a filthy Mercy main, or at the very least, aspiring to be one. Here, you will find tips that will be both basic and advanced, so there will be something for everyone. Working on these things won't guarantee you the ability to climb the competitive ladder, but if you work hard enough, they will be enough to see some improvement in your Mercy play. By the end, you should be left clicking like a pro. But first, I would like to credit Viveros Gaming, as he was the one who first suggested I should do this guide. Before actually getting started on the guide, let's take a look at Mercy's control settings. There are 3 changeable ones, almost all of which being up to personal preference. The first of them is Toggle Guardian Angel. Personally, I play with this setting turned off, as it allows you to fly to your target immediately if you hold shift, without needing to see the lock-on icon first. You can also control your flight with greater ease, cancelling the flight just by letting go of shift. Next to the controls is Toggle Beam Connection. If you have this setting turned off, as soon as you let go of your mouse button, the beam will disconnect. I like to have this setting turned on, as having to hold down the mouse buttons to keep your beam on someone can really start to hurt your fingers after a while. Having this turned off allows you to quickly switch between healing and damage boosting a certain target. It is also understandable to have this setting turned off if you have the next setting turned on. This setting is Guardian Angel prefers beam target. Now, this setting is entirely dependent upon your playstyle, and I highly recommend playing with it both on and off to see what you prefer. With this setting, as long as your beam is attached to someone, you will fly to them, no matter if you have line of sight to them or not. However, if your beam is attached to someone, and you and the person it is connected to is in danger, you can't look around to someone else to fly to, unless you disconnect the beam. If you've tried all of these out, and have found the settings to your liking, it is time to move on with the guide. In regards to Mercy's kit, she isn't that complex compared to other heroes. She has 2 weapons, the Caduceus Staff and the Caduceus Blaster. Her main weapon is her Caduceus Staff, the primary fire being a healing beam that automatically attaches to the target closest to your crosshair and starts healing 60 health per second. This means that Mercy is able to completely negate the effects of Winston's Tesla cannon. Her alternate fire is a damage beam, amplifying damage that the beam's target does by 30%. Mercy's Caduceus Blaster is her alternate weapon, which happens to be a pistol with 20 bullets in its clip, dealing 20 damage per body shot and 40 for a critical hit. This allows you to deal out the hurt in a pinch against flankers if you have no other way to escape them. When firing at them, try to stay within melee range, as mixing in a melee shot when they are close to death is vital to killing targets as Mercy. After 1 second of not taking any damage, Mercy's passive will activate, allowing her to regen her health slightly over time. However, this regeneration will stop as soon as she takes any damage. Mercy's ultimate is called Valkyrie. Activating it causes the full power of her Valkyrie suit to be unleashed. Both of her beams can be tethered to multiple people, and her beam range is extended, as well as her Guardian Angel range. Her regeneration is no longer interrupted by the player taking damage. Most often, Valkyrie is used as an engager for fights, with the multiple target healing and damage boost being extremely effective for taking enemies out swiftly. A trap that some Mercy players seem to fall into is healing people while you are in Valk, even when the fight is lost, and when there is only one other person on your team left. Let's say, for example, that Roadhog was stuck in the fight and would have no way to get out. Even if you are in Valk, it would be best just to stop healing the Hog and return to your team, as you are just prolonging his death and feeding the enemies more ult charge. One good skill to learn as Mercy is keeping track of ultimates. The main 2 that you want to look out for are Soldier's Tactical Visor and McCree's Deadeye, as these are the 2 ults that are easiest to counter you while you are in Valk. 2 more ults that you want to keep track of is Ryan's Earth Shatter and Zarya's Graviton, as your ultimate has the chance to save your team from them, provided that you aren't stunned. One tip to have more Valkyries in a game is if the fight is over and your team needs healing, but you are still in Valk, don't heal until Valk is over. This can give you a varying amount of ult charge, depending on how many people are low and how low they actually are. Something that you hear quite often about Mercy players is that they always seem to whine about their team not protecting them. While this can be true to some extent, I think it is a completely pointless excuse, that in all honesty should not exist. As Mercy, you have more than enough tools given to you to avoid danger and to keep yourself alive. You are one of the most agile characters in the game. Make use of it. With Mercy's rework that came in September of 2017, Mercy players got a new way to move, making for a more versatile Guardian Angel. During your Guardian Angel, press and hold space before reaching your target to let your momentum push you that extra bit of distance that you can use to hide behind cover or just gain better mobility in general. This also works while you are in Valk, and you are able to fly down to a person, use the new Guardian Angel, and propel yourself forward slightly, into cover or away from enemy fire. In my opinion, the best protection that a team can give is simply killing the enemy. You can't always rely on a shield tank or abilities from other players to keep you alive. Sometimes, you just have to take matters into your own hands. One of the most important, if not the most important thing to know as Mercy, is how to position yourself. If you do not know how to position yourself well, you will find yourself in certain death situations. However, there are no certain rules that will always apply when trying to work out where you need to have yourself be positioned. The only help that can be given is sorts of guidelines. One of these guidelines would be using a map's geometry. Utilizing walls, trees, and other objects to block line of sight is an incredibly useful skill to learn when trying to work out where to position yourself. An example of this would be this spot here on Hanamura Point A defense. With it, you are able to keep an eye on the top right flank, and also keep yourself out of line of sight of most enemies, because you would be using the corner of the wall as cover, whilst also being able to keep your tanks up by picking out to attach your beam to them, like so. If the enemies start to push through and your team has to back up, you can also back up along the wall, using the max beam range, as well as keeping an eye on the flank to the left of you. You are once again able to keep out of line of sight of enemies. However, this does not always work, so this isn't a rule of any sort. Another spot that I like to sit in while my team is sitting high ground is this spot right here on Route 66. However, in my opinion, it isn't as good as the Hanamura spot for a few reasons. One of these reasons is the fact that there are too many flanks for you to keep your eyes on. But there is still something that you can do to keep using this spot as effectively as possible. All that you need to do is keep an ear out for sound cues. While watching the flank at the top right, you can listen out for the noticeable sound of a tracer blink or a soldier sprinting behind the station. The sound of movement, or just the sound of players being generally near you, is a great source of information. It can tell you whether or not you need to reposition yourself to stay away from danger. Another big thing to look out for when trying to work out where you should position yourself is where the enemies themselves are standing. Now, this may sound as if I'm accusing you of going, yes, it's a great idea to position myself right in front of the enemy's face, as if I'm not one of the most important targets on my team. Instead, I mean it in a different way. Is the enemy in the Creed trying to get high ground, or is flanking for a high noon? I should stay behind cover just in case. Has the Zarya been high charged for a while and is playing aggressively? I should play more passively because she seems to be looking for a Graviton Surge. Keeping an eye on where the enemies are positioning themselves can give you some insight on what they are planning to do next. A good general tip is to try and stick slightly away from your team, where you are utilizing max beam distance, so that getting caught by a Graviton or in a Death Blossom is less likely. Enemies getting themselves into position typically means that they are preparing themselves for a team fight. During a team fight, all players on your team will be taking damage, meaning that all players on your team will need healing at the same time. Because of this, you need to know how to prioritize who gets healing first. Once again, there's no rules for who to prioritize, but there is a general format for who should get heals first. In my mind, it goes second healer, then DPS, and then the tanks. My thought process behind this is that if you keep your second healer alive, they can do some of the healing that you end up missing out on. However, as always, this is not the be-all end-all of healing prioritization. There will be circumstances where you will need to break this format. One thing that you will need to take into consideration is how much health that the character has in general. Both Soldier and D.Va may be on critical health, but when at half health, Soldier has 100 health points while D.Va has 300. Another thing to take into consideration is how much armor the character has. Since the armor absorbs some damage, keeping it topped up, even while others are taking damage, can help them last a lot longer in a teamfight than they would otherwise. You need to be careful of this, however, as you want to make sure that the person who is genuinely low on your team doesn't die. As Mercy, your job is to keep your entire team alive, but it is not to go help teammates while they are making stupid mistakes. You do not need to fly all the way out in the open to try and heal the hog that is overextended. If you were to do this, the hog would most likely die, leaving you out of position, most likely to die as well. Just tell the person that is overextended that you aren't able to get healing to them from where you are and ask them to come back to you. Sometimes, it is also best to just leave your healing target to die. If your team is engaged in a team fight, but you are stuck in the back trying to help out your Zen because he has both a D.Va and a Winston on him, it would be best just to leave him. If you try to stay and help the Zen, the team fight is in reality 2 fights. The 2 enemy tanks versus both you and the Zen. While the actual team fight is a 4v4, but your team isn't receiving the healing that they need, as you are occupied with your Zen. If you leave him, however, you make the fight a 5v4, allowing your team to have the advantage health-wise, so they should be able to get the necessary picks to swing the fight in your favour. The tanks would also, at the same time, prey on your Zen, and then choose to rejoin the fight once he is dead. Once those tanks have rejoined the fight, you may even have the chance to sneak back and resurrect the dead player. Now that we have talked about healing target priorities, it is time to talk about the target priorities for Mercy's alternate fire, her damage boost. The damage boost is the most underutilized part of Mercy's kit in my opinion. There are only 3 things in the game that it cannot amplify, these being Junkrat's Tire, Symmetra's turrets, and Torb's turret. Before we get started with the prioritization though, there is one thing that you should get into the habit of doing. Whenever there is no healing needed to be done, leave your damage beam on people instead of the healing one. That way, the beam is technically constantly doing something, instead of healing a full health target. Now, onto the actual target prioritization. Of course, the number 1 type of character that you need to damage boost would be the DPS, as they are the ones dealing the consistent damage. However, damage boosting a Junkrat at the beginning of a round is better than damage boosting a soldier, as the spam doesn't need line of sight. Because of this, a Junkrat is able to get quick and easy damage off at the beginning of games when defending. However, as the game progresses, it becomes a smarter idea to boost the hitscan heroes, as they do the more consistent type of damage. Another good skill to learn is practicing quickly flicking the damage boost on. Whenever a Roadhog hooks, but he is still low, you can heal him right up until he is about to fire the shot. When he fires the shot, damage boost it, and then go back to healing. Damage boosting a hog hook almost always secures a one-shot kill on squishy targets. One added effect that damage boost has is giving extra ultimate charge for both you as Mercy and the person you are damage boosting. Because of this, sometimes it pays off to focus your damage boost on a certain target. For example, if the enemy Genji has or is close to his Dragon Blade, but your Zenyatta doesn't have Transcendence yet, it would be a good idea to damage boost his orbs whenever possible, in the hopes of building up his ult quick enough to counter the Genji's own ultimate. Another way to use Mercy's damage boost is to use it to boost other ultimates. Sometimes, a pocketed Genji can be more terrifying than a nano boosted Genji, as he also has the portable heals. For all the damage that you amplify, you also gain ult charge from this. If you thought that a teamfight was about to engage, but you were slightly too far away from Valk, you can damage boost insta-kill ultimates to quickly gain ult percentage. One of the ults that you can damage boost is D.Va's self-destruct. For each person that she kills, you will gain 5% ult charge. To damage boost it, however, you need to boost Baby D.Va, and not the mech. If D.Va was to get a team kill, and you damage boosted her, you would instantly gain 30% ult charge for doing nothing. Now, let's say for example that no matter how much healing you are trying to do, 2 people on your team end up dying. Don't worry, it happens to us all. As Mercy, you have the ability to bring one of these players back from the dead. But who do you choose to resurrect? Should you even resurrect at all? To find the answers to these questions, you need to look at a few factors. One of these factors is how many people on the enemy team are dead. Resurrect at its core is an ability that is used to balance out numbers during teamfights, as to swing the fight in your advantage. If you had just lost 2 players and had gotten no picks prior, there would be no reason to res, as all you'd be doing would be making the fight a 5v6, where the odds still aren't in your favour. Another factor that you might sometimes need to consider is how fast the person you didn't resurrect would get back to the fight. Say that you were defending on the second stage of Junkertown, and you lost both your Junkrat and your Zenyatta as the fight was over. The smarter person to res would be the Zenyatta, as he would have no movement abilities to return to the fight quickly. The resurrect would still be necessary, even if the fight was over, as the enemy team has closer respawns. Speaking of necessary resurrects, let's talk about the opposite. Bad times to res. One of the absolute worst times to resurrect may not even be a bad res when you start the cast time, but by the time it is finished, everything has gone to shit. The example that I am talking about here is when you try and res someone slightly out of position when attacking, but during the cast time, your entire team has died, but you are still able to get the res off. The reason that this is such a bad res is simply because you are not going to win that fight. All that you have done in this position is given the enemies an ult charge battery, you and the person you rezzed. Just because you are able to pull a resurrect off does not necessarily mean that it was a good and necessary resurrection. Most Mercy players by now know that it is best to resurrect people who are nearby cover, as you are able to fall behind it to keep out of enemy line of sight. However, this is not always the case, as sometimes players die out in the open. Remember how I said to not always trust a shield tank or player abilities to keep you alive? Well, this does not apply here. Coordination with your team is vital when playing Mercy. Simply asking your Orisa or Rein to put their shield up in front of you, or getting your Zarya to save a bubble for you when you go in for a res works wonders. You can also get your secondary support to focus healing on you, but make sure that they will actually do so, and that your team won't miss out on healing because of it. If you are running dive and you have Valkyrie up, get both your tanks to dive on someone, and then activate your Valk so you can stay back, away from the enemies, while your tanks deal the damage. Since Mercy so heavily relies upon her team, try to build a type of connection with them, and be that anchor point. Because you are staying in the back of teamfights, or flying above them, you are able to see more of what's going on. When you notice that someone is flanking, or that Genji should have ult by now, you should relay the information to your team. Remember, he who holds the information, holds the power. So now that you've heard all the information I have to give to you, I hope that you have gained something to work on, or have gained some new knowledge. However, if there is any information that I have missed, I would love to hear it, as I am always trying to become a better Mercy myself, so leave your thoughts in the comments below. Take care everybody, bye bye.